Ronaldinho. Imagine a future Ballon d'Or winner turning up on a cold Tuesday night to play in Paisley, because it nearly happened. Back in 2001, Paris Saint-Germain had just won the race to sign the dazzling 21-year-old Ronaldinho from Grêmio. Arsenal wanted him too, but PSG sealed the deal with a €5 million pre-contract. Only one problem: the Brazilian season was over and Ronaldinho was stuck in no man's land, waiting to officially join the French side. So to stay match fit, the idea was a short-term loan to Europe. Cue the most unlikely phone call in football history. St Mirren, rock bottom of the Scottish Premier League and desperate for goals, get a call from Brazil. Manager Tom Hendry is told, "We've got this kid here who needs game time before his move to France goes through. Name's Ronaldinho." PSG were happy, Ronaldinho was happy, St Mirren were ecstatic. They lined up a house, a car and a modest salary. It all looked like it was happening. The Home Office gave them early approval, the Scottish FA were on board, everything looked set for Ronaldinho to line up for St Mirren. There was one problem though. Grêmio had to release him and the Brazilian FA had to confirm the PSG pre-contract. But, and this is genuinely what happened, the entire Brazilian FA shut down to watch the national team play. Nobody picked up the phone, time ran out and the transfer deadline passed. Just like that, Ronaldinho's Scottish adventure was over before it began. A year later he won the World Cup, then the Ballon d'Or and became one of the most iconic players of the generation. Meanwhile St Mirren, well, they were relegated. Didier Drogba, Champions League winner, Chelsea legend, and almost a Celtic player. This one's not a rumour, it actually could have happened. Back in 2001, Drogba was playing in France with Le Mans. He wasn't a global star yet, just a raw, powerful striker on the rise. Celtic were flying high under Martin O'Neill, with a front line of Henrik Larsson, Chris Sutton, and John Hartson. Stacked, basically. Enter Momo Silla, a Celtic player at the time and good mate and former teammate of Drogba's. According to Silla, Drogba was desperate to join him in Glasgow. He even offered to come on a free and earn just $10,000 a month, which is a lot of money, but barely a fraction of what he'd later command at Chelsea. But Silla told him not to bother. He said Drogba wouldn't get a game ahead of Larsson, Sutton, and Hartson. He's probably right, but in a few years, Drogba would overtake the lot of them. Instead, Drogba stayed in France, joined Marseille, then moved to Chelsea, and became one of the best strikers of his generation. And Celtic, they still had a legendary team, but they were this close to adding an absolute monster up front. Lionel Messi. In the early 2000s, Messi was just a tiny teenager lighting it up in Barcelona's youth ranks. Rangers were going through a bit of a rebuild under Alex McLeish, Barry Ferguson had left for Blackburn, and they were sniffing around for creative midfielders. A few years earlier, while the manager of Hibs, Alex McLeish's son, John, spotted a young Lionel Messi in Football Manager and told his dad he's going to be the best player in the world. Years later, now managing Rangers, McLeish remembered the name and asked about Messi through assistant Jan Wouters, who was pals with Barcelona's Henk ten Cate. The answer, a polite but definite no chance. Messi was already on the fringes of the Barca team and they thought Scottish football might be a bit too physical for him anyway. At the same time, they also inquired about another youngster, Andreas Iniesta. Ten Cate told Wouters he'd get back to him, but Iniesta made the team that weekend and never looked back. So no, Messi didn't nearly play at Ibrox, but Rangers genuinely asked, and imagine if the answer had been yes. Riyad Mahrez. Long before he lit up the Premier League with Leicester and Man City, a teenage Mahrez was unknown and unproven, playing amateur football in France, desperate for an opportunity. It came through a man called Jake Duncan, a music promoter who worked with the likes of Britain's Got Talent winner Paul Potts and boy band JLS. He liked to do a little bit of football talent spotting and would organise trial games in different suburbs across Paris. The best of them would then be sent on trials at different clubs, many of them ending up at St Mirren, and many of them not being at the required ability. But when Mahrez arrived in Paisley on the 25th of January 2009, he stood out straight away. He was slender, skinny, to the point Duncan literally wrote, "needs to eat more porridge" on his scouting report. But technically, he was levels above. He rinsed players in 5-a-sides, he scored a hat-trick in 15 minutes against the senior team. St Mirren's academy boss at the time, David Longwell, raved about him on the phone. Everyone knew this kid had something. But here's the issue. Mahrez turned 18 less than a month into his trial. And once he hit that age, the academy couldn't sign him. It had to be the first team coaches who made the call. And for them, he was too skinny, too lightweight, and not suited to the physical side of Scottish football. So they hesitated, and Mahrez waited in the snow of Scotland for 2 months. He snapped. The conditions were brutal for him. He later compared training in Scotland to abuse. A bit of an overreaction, I think, but at one point he faked an injury just to go back inside and warm up. Eventually done with waiting, he hatched an escape plan. Pack a bag, slip out the side door of the hotel, steal a bike, get to the bus stop, bus to Glasgow, where his agent had booked him a flight back to Paris. Gone before anyone could even notice. In fact, he even left his boots behind. A year later he signed for Le Havre, then came Leicester, then a £60 million move to Man City. Multiple league titles, a Champions League, he even won AFCON. Meanwhile, someone in Paisley is still wondering what happened to their bike. Hristo Stoichkov, Barcelona legend, Ballon d'Or winner, scorer in a World Cup semi-final, and for a moment, genuinely heavily linked with Airdrie. It's 2000 and Airdrie are in their financial trouble era. Ex-Barcelona, Tottenham and Scotland international Steve Archibald is now leading the club, trying to launch what he calls the new Broomfield Revolution. His vision is to use his vast contacts throughout the game to bring in some great foreign talents, specifically focusing on Spain. Bringing in names like Jesus Garcia Sanjun, Javier Sanchez Barroto, Antonio Calderon, David Fernandez and Miguel Alfonso. And he thinks who better to lead them than his old pal from Barcelona, Hristo Stoichkov. At the time, Stoichkov was 34, playing for Chicago Fire in the MLS, and still putting up decent numbers, 5 goals and 7 starts. He'd just retired from international football, Bulgaria's record scorer and cap holder, and by all accounts would have been great in Scotland. Archibald confirmed he'd spoken to Stoichkov, who was reportedly very interested, but there was one catch. His MLS contract ran until December, and Airdrie would have had to either pay, which they couldn't afford, or wait. Still, Archibald was willing. He said, if I can get Hristo before then, it would be a real bonus, and if not, he'd wait. But by the time December came around, the speculation was gone. Airdrie went into liquidation at the start of 2002. Diego Maradona Jr, the son of football's greatest, nearly played in Scotland. No, he wasn't world class like his dad, but this one's too wild not to include. It's July 2004, Dunfermline just finished 4th in the SPL and reached the Scottish Cup final. Manager David Hayes looking for that spark. His Italian agent mate says, how about Diego Maradona's son? The football world flings its arms in disbelief. Maradona Jr arrives at Edinburgh Airport with an entourage, agents, family, the whole circus. He trains with Dunfermline for 2 days at East End Park, with public sessions to build even more media hype. But then his demands arrived. He wanted a flat, first-class flights for his family, and a much higher wage than Dunfermline were expecting. Jim Leishman said he was decent, but not good enough for what he wanted. And that was proven correct, as he only ever made it as high as Serie C and beach football and didn't earn a contract with Dunfermline. But the name, the moment, and the media circus, it was pure Scottish football theatre. If you're enjoying this video, I hope to post a lot on here, so please consider subscribing. Back to it. Johan Cruyff. We've all heard of him, he's one of the most influential figures in football history. But what you probably haven't heard is that he once held talks about signing for Dumbarton. With the team struggling and attendances dwindling, Dumbarton needed a miracle. Manager Sean Fallon came up with a plan. Fly to Holland, offer Cruyff a few £1,000s per game, a lot of money back then, and see what happens. It sounds ridiculous because it kinda was, but Fallon wasn't messing around. He and the chairman actually flew to Amsterdam, sat down with Cruyff, and pitched him the deal. Cruyff at the time was 33, his best years were behind him, and he just lost a fortune in a dodgy business deal. So the offer, a short-term stint in Scotland picking up a solid wage per appearance, wasn't totally outlandish. But in the end, he said no. Years later on a golf trip to Scotland, he admitted, "Was I tempted? Yes, of course. But I thought I was too old to go to Scotland because of the weather. When you're older, your muscles get stiff, it would have been a problem." So no Cruyff at Boghead Park, no total football in Dumbarton, but for a few days in 1980, everyone was talking about the Suns, thanks to a mad idea, a cheeky flight to Holland, and a serious chat with one of the greatest players of all time. Diego Forlan, Golden Ball winner, Atletico Madrid legend, World Cup semi-finalist and all-round great striker. But before all that, he was almost a Dundee player. Let's rewind to the early 2000s. Forlan is a 21-year-old striker playing in Argentina for Independiente. He's already shown flashes of brilliance and clubs in Europe are starting to take notice. At the time, Ivano Benetti, the legendary player turned manager, was doing his best to turn Dundee into the #1 place in Scotland for foreign talent. Benetti was going big. He brought in players like Claudio Caniggia and Fabrizio Ravanelli, and apparently he also had Diego Forlan lined up. According to multiple reports at the time, Dundee were the first club in Europe to heavily scout Diego Forlan. The club were interested in bringing him to Dens Park as part of their South American recruitment push. There was even talk of a formal offer, or at the very least, concrete interest. But as ever, there was competition. Forlan also began to start attracting attention from Middlesbrough, and later, crucially, Manchester United. And once Sir Alex Ferguson came calling, the writing was on the wall. Dundee had already given up by that point. Forlan joined Manchester United in 2002 for around 7 million. He had a rocky start but eventually became a fan favourite, scoring iconic goals. He went on to play in Spain and was the best player at the 2010 World Cup as he helped Uruguay reach the semi-final. David Ginola, the French wizard with luxurious locks and a left foot that could thread needles, has been heavily rumoured to be coming to play in Scotland twice. 2 separate clubs, 2 separate occasions. In 1995, Ginola was fresh off his PSG success and eyeing a move away. Celtic's manager Tommy Burns and chief executive Fergus McCann wanted him and pulled out all the stops. City tour, stadium visit, face-to-face pitch. Ginola remembered it clearly years later. "I had the pen in my hand, ready to sign. I just said, I need to think about it. I just ran away. Fergus McCann was there, Tommy Burns was there. They showed me the city. I didn't know much about Glasgow." According to Ginola, the money on offer was exactly the same as Newcastle's, but the lure of the English Premier League won out. It wasn't a question of money. The money was probably the same. We were talking about playing in the Scottish Premier League or playing in the Premier League. It was as simple as that. He'd go on to be a great player for Newcastle, then Tottenham, but years later, Scotland came calling again. Fast forward to 2002, and the now 33-year-old Ginola was on the fringes at Aston Villa. That's when Hibs entered the chat. Then manager Frank Sozzi, a fellow Frenchman and former teammate, was reportedly keen to bring him in on a short-term deal. There was real hope this could happen. Hibs were struggling and needed a spark. Ginola's agent didn't rule it out either, saying, "In football, anything's possible." But ultimately, this wasn't. Ginola stayed put and the dream of him lighting up Easter Road never came to pass. Instead, he focused on, well, hair commercials. Still, for a brief moment, both Celtic and Hibs had the chance to land one of the most technically gifted wingers of his generation. Ronaldo, not Cristiano, the original R9. One of the most electrifying strikers to ever kick a football. A World Cup winner by 17, a Ballon d'Or winner by 21, and in 1997, he nearly signed for Rangers. Ronaldo was tearing up La Liga with Barcelona. 47 goals in 49 games. Ballon d'Or winner, European Cup winner, but contract negotiations were stuck. That's when Giovanni Brancini, his agent, got some serious offers, and one came from Glasgow. Brancini revealed Rangers pitched it big. He didn't have to play in the Scottish League on Saturdays, he'd only feature in Champions League fixtures, he'd be the highest paid player in history, over even what he earned at Barcelona. Brancini described it as incredible. Ronaldo later confirmed it. He said, "Yes, it's true. I received an offer from Glasgow Rangers. We looked at it and decided the best offer at the time was from Inter Milan, so I gave my apologies." It was real, it was bold, but when Inter Milan triggered his release clause with a then world record bid of around 20 million, it was clear there was only one place he was going. Ronaldo went to Inter, dominated Serie A, scored 59 goals in 99 games, and became a legend across Milan, Madrid, and Brazil. So yeah, Rangers almost signed Ronaldo, El Phenomenon himself. It never happened, but in the summer of 1997, Scotland stared down the barrel of football history's most insane what if.